Deciding on the value of naive art is not an easy task, but there are a few artists in this genre that are absolutely remarkable, and Henri Rousseau is perhaps the most remarkable of them all. Henri Rousseau was born in France, in Laval, on the 21st of May, 1844. He was definitely one of a kind when it came to categorizing his late 19th and early 20th century art. First of all, Henri Rousseau was a modern painter, a post-impressionist, and finally, he was labeled as a naïve or primitive painter because of lack of formal training and relying on self-guidance in his artistic path. Henri Rousseau was born in Laval, a town in western France, to a working-class family, the son of a tinsmith with quite a modest upbringing. His mother was the daughter of an infantry colonel in the time of Napoleon Bonaparte. By the time he reached the age of 10, Henri Rousseau was left at a boarding school because his parents were in serious financial trouble and had to leave town. As a young boy, Rousseau displayed interest and talent in drawing and playing violin, but his family had no means to support his talents with additional lessons. After high school, the very young Rousseau found employment as a worker in a solicitor's office. During that time, he faced his first troubles with the law. He was caught stealing some stamps and a small sum of money. As a consequence, he decided to join the infantry to maybe escape imprisonment. And it worked because he was already enlisted in the army, and the judge reduced his sentence to only 1 month in prison. He only served 4 years in the army between 1864 and 1868, and was discharged as the only provider and supporter of his widowed mother. The stories about him serving in the Foreign Legion in Mexico with the French army were just stories he liked to tell, and that were reinforced by his later supporter Guillaume Apollinaire, but were completely untrue. He did, however, meet colleagues in the army that were deployed to Mexico to serve in support of Emperor Maximilian I and returned to France to tell stories about the mysterious foreign land. This could have been a source of inspiration for his paintings of tropical forests and jungles. He then moved to Paris and found work as a toll collector in the Paris Municipal Toll Office that was charging taxes for goods entering the city. This would earn him the very famous nickname Le Douanier, or the customs officer, although his job wasn't in the actual customs office. In 1869, he married Clémence Boitard, with whom he had quite a few children, from which only one survived into adult life. In the 1870s, he started to paint regularly, mainly in his free time, his goal being to reach the level of his academic masters and exhibit in the Paris official salon alongside them. He submitted a few works to the Salon, but they were rejected, and he turned instead to the Salon of Independent Artists, or Le Salon des Artistes Indépendants, that had no jury. It was created as a response to the official Salon that rejected the newcoming artists that broke ties with traditional art. They needed a place of their own to exhibit and be seen, and why not sell some paintings? The Salon des Indépendants was created by young artists such as Georges Seurat, Paul Signac, and Odilon Redon, and others belonging to the Société des Artistes Indépendants, or Society of Independent Artists. In 1884, he was granted permission to copy the works of great masters such as Jacques-Louis David, Antoine Bouguereau, and others at the Louvre Museum, and in 1886 he submitted the work Carnival Evening at the Salon of Independent Artists. The following years, he sent a few paintings and drawings, making a name for himself well into the new century. His style, without perspective or depth, proper proportions, and volume, was appreciated by young modern artists that recognized the potential naive master in Rousseau's canvases crammed with vegetation, luxurious jungles and tropical forests, hiding and revealing exotic animals such as lions, tigers, apes, and colorful birds. After being ill for a long time, his wife Clémence eventually died in 1888. Their daughter was sent to live with relatives, and their son remained and shared a small studio with Rousseau until the boy's death in 1897. A few years later, Rousseau married again to Joséphine Noury in 1899. In all these years, he never stopped working and sending paintings to the Salon of Independent Artists. Henri Rousseau eventually retired from his sole office job in 1893 to dedicate his full time to painting, and thanks to people like Félix Vallotton, he ended up in the avant-garde circles of Parisian artists. Alfred Jarry, a newcoming literary phenomenon of his era, was enchanted with Rousseau's both powerful and naive paintings and introduced him to intellectuals of their time, furthering his support and acknowledgement. By this time, he considered himself a great artist and took his own work very seriously, despite much ridicule that he faced throughout the years. He saw himself as the soul, or better said, the first representative of a completely new genre. To earn some additional money, as his retirement pension was barely enough for a modest living, he played violin in the streets of Paris and sought to give out violin and painting or drawing lessons. His wife Joséphine had set up a small shop to sell Rousseau's paintings and drawings, but without much success. She eventually died in 1903. By this time, Henri Rousseau, despite being highly appreciated and genuinely valued by modern artists, critics, and writers of the avant-garde, he struggled in dire poverty and couldn't even keep up with his ever-growing bill at the art supply store. Sadly, Rousseau's dream of being accepted as an official great artist was never realized during his lifetime. He was oftentimes met with ridicule and sarcasm. He died on the 2nd of September 1910 after an operation on his leg. Earlier that year, he painted a large canvas with his most iconic painting to that date, The Dream. After his passing, the Salon of Independent Artists organized an exhibition in honor of Le Douanier, the most prolific amateur artist who is forever to remain labeled as an intriguing, primitive painter of the modern era. Naive art usually belongs to artists that lack formal training or reject it in some cases and rely solely on their intuition, observation, and imagination to build an artwork. Generally, they don't use perspective, volume, depth, or accurate proportions. Naive art has a childlike quality because it is sincere and doesn't belong to a trend in order to fit in or seek success. Henri Rousseau is the archetypal naive painter, and he dedicated his entire life to perfecting his craft, even though he didn't receive formal training. In his luxurious jungle scenes, he adds plants and elements that would not be in the jungle or tropical forest in reality. He exaggerates the size of plants and leaves, doesn't complete the drawing of his subject, like the feet for example, because some elements are too complicated to draw and he just couldn't get it right. But in the end, the whole image together manages to create a feeling of the place that you see before you. The enchantment is present and it draws you in just as much as looking at a far more skillful artist would. My Self-Portrait Landscape. With this 1890 painting, Henri Rousseau wanted to create the image of an accomplished painter in the academic style of his predecessors, with the Parisian landscape in the background. The great city's backdrop with its iconic elements such as the Eiffel Tower and the River Seine have the purpose of upholding the figure of Rousseau, almost a giant in the old city. He is walking in the footsteps of other great painters before him. The difference is that those other great painters had official status and recognition. Rousseau is wearing a black suit, a painter's hat, holding a palette and brush in his hands. If you look closer, on the palette there's an inscription, Clémence et Joséphine, the names of his two wives. The painter's figure is larger than any other element and greatly disproportionate to the couple in the left corner, for example. Also, he appears to be floating in air because of how his feet were constructed and how the ground is slightly tilted forward. The elements of Paris in the image, like the Eiffel Tower, the River Seine, and the bridge, the buildings and the people, the hot air balloon, and the ship with many flags, seem to be in harmony with each other. They seem to belong to the same world. The painter's figure seems from another dimension, larger and separated from the society in the background. Is he better than the rest? Better than the society that did not give him recognition he deserved? Or are they just coexisting in a semi-dysfunctional relationship somehow? This painting belongs to the National Gallery in Prague. The Snake Charmer. This 1907 life-size painting was commissioned by the mother of painter Robert Delaunay, Comtesse Berthe de Delaunay, and was exhibited later that year in the Autumn Salon in Paris. The painting is a reminder of Eve in the Garden of Eden, complete with serpent. In fact, it's a snake charmer that plays with her flute a melody which manages to enchant the many snakes around her and around her shoulders. She manages to enchant us as well, a mysterious figure hidden in a dark shadow of the lush jungle, with her bright eyes staring at us. The elements of vegetation were added by Rousseau as his usual trademark in terms of landscape, after studying magazines, books, and the Parisian botanical gardens. Although he claimed to have visited some of the exotic places that inspired his canvases, he in fact did not leave France, but instead had quite a fascination with exotic plants and vegetation, and rendered them with much care, almost like a small individual portrait, in a very decorative manner. The execution is both naive and precise, the color palette is quite harmonious, managing to incorporate in its harmony even the pink flamingo on the left. The dreamlike quality of the image, with its mysterious main character and odd association of plants, birds, and animals, seemed to anticipate the coming of surrealism in later years. This painting can be admired at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. Tiger in a tropical storm or surprised. We see a lot of jungle scenes and tropical forests in Rousseau's paintings. In fact, it's the subject that he is best known for. And this painting that we see now is the first of that series he will return to paint later in his life. Made in 1891, Surprised is an entirely different thing altogether than what was seen at the Paris Salon des Indépendants. It shows a tiger ready to pounce on his prey, when a lightning strikes and stops time, so as the tiger remains forever in his most tense position. We can even see the lightning flash across the sky, marked with a few fine lines in a distant background. The luxuriant tropical forest is trying to move with the wind and lean forward, but some elements completely defy the laws of physics and remain still. We again can see a whole variety of plants, painted very carefully and detailed, just like the main character is. The fur, beautifully colored and striped, the whiskers, and the teeth, uniquely equal in shape and size, and the animal's surprised, wide-open eye. Rousseau left it to our imagination to add the prey that seems to be a bit further away, beyond the edge of the canvas. At the Salon exhibit, the painting received mixed reviews, but painter Félix Vallotton called it the alpha and omega of painting. Well, nothing stirs up controversy and mix of reactions like a truly great painting. Today, Tiger in a Tropical Storm resides at the National Gallery in London. Portrait of Madame M. This portrait is such a treat because we see the entire figure with a beautiful background of trees and flowers, all very carefully executed. The figure of the woman in a large-sleeved black dress is taller than the trees and dominates the composition. She wears a very elegant dress adorned with a pale yellow scarf and completed with white pearl jewelry. Her head and face details are austere, minimalistic, but painted with care and attention. In her left hand she holds a stylish umbrella that matches her dress. This whole ensemble creates rather a sober feeling that is wonderfully diluted by the presence of a very, very small cat playing with a ball of yarn down in the corner, and the presence of daisies and poppies, which add delightful touches of color and light. Rich vegetation in the back lacks depth, is almost poster-like, but is very carefully executed and indicates the fondness Rousseau had for painting trees, leaves, and flowers. We do not know who the model is. It is thought she might have been a commissioner of Rousseau's, because he did paint for a few francs every now and again when he was requested to. There is another similar portrait, made in about the same time frame, which was acquired by Pablo Picasso for 5 francs, that is not quite as radiant and luminous as this one, but is certainly worth mentioning in the category of female portraits. The portrait of Madame M can be found at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. Carnival Evening. Completed in 1886, Carnival Evening was among the first more complex and truly interesting compositions to be submitted at the Salon of Independent Artists. The atmosphere is truly dreamlike, a wonderful, surreal landscape, the full moon, a dark forest, and a couple dressed in carnival clothing. The two small characters are the only source of light and color in the dark forest, bringing a bit of life and movement to the solemn scenery. Rousseau manages to create such beauty in the leafless, very tall trees. They are just as picturesque and enchanting like the later ones in the jungles. The lone couple appear somehow caught in the stillness and engulfed in a dark forest in which they wander who knows why. But from the shadow from the small hut near them, they are being watched by a man whose body is unseen. We see the profile of his face, apparently observing the two lost carnival attendees. With a touch of playfulness, the ridiculous outfits of the two main characters balance a potentially eerie scene. Their anatomical details, like the hands and fingers, are merely suggested, their faces can be slightly deciphered, but the warmth of their presence lights up the entire painting. The Philadelphia Museum of Art is the current owner of this painting. The Merry Jesters. The Merry Jesters was painted in 1906, and it's another jungle scene in which we can see a few bearded monkeys facing us, caught in a moment of play or whatever it is that monkeys do in the jungle. A very stoic-looking bird is also facing us and sitting on a beautifully decorated branch above the mischievous main characters. Green foliage is beautifully interwoven so that it provides a natural frame for the protagonists. Every branch and every leaf are carefully constructed and rendered with color. It's like the animals and birds were there at the beginning and the vegetation began to grow around them to provide the visual context. Like the bird, a flower on the left offers a contrast of bright white among the lush greenery of exotic plants. A symphony of rhythm and color, a naïve look at a faraway piece of nature from the distance of Paris and its wild gardens and zoos, postcards and magazines that Rousseau had visited and studied for his work. This painting can also be seen at the Museum of Art in Philadelphia. Exotic Landscape. Painted in 1910 with other variants, this exotic landscape is a colorful, joyful composition that showcases the happenings of the jungle. The huge orange tree is the main interest here as it has a rich supply of fruit to be enjoyed by all the tree-swinging characters in the foreground. On the left, a line of dangling apes show off their contentment with the ripe oranges ready to be eaten. In the center, another one lies on the ground with its arms and legs up in the air, hanging on to the deliciously gigantic orange. Slightly to the left, with a grayish fur, is covering its face with an orange as it is ready to enjoy it. The overall feeling of the scene is captured using bright colors and simple shapes that fall like ornaments around the playful antics of the furry protagonists. This is another example where Rousseau combines different types of vegetation and animals that do not usually belong together and exaggerates proportions to create the aesthetic of his inner world. This painting belongs to the Norton Simon Museum in Pasadena, California. Fight between a tiger and a buffalo. Henri Rousseau was imprisoned in 1907 after an acquaintance of his persuaded him to participate in bank fraud. We don't know whether he was tricked into taking part in this or he did so consciously, but he did convince the judge that he was unaware of the implications of his actions and that he wasn't knowledgeable about the fact that he was committing a felony, that he was basically just naive. This worked in his favor and soon was freed from jail. Just in time to exhibit Fight Between a Tiger and a Buffalo at the Salon of Independent Artists in 1908. In this image, a buffalo is fighting for his life to escape the claws of a tiger among a scenery of gigantic leaves and fruit trees. Rousseau actually painted the bananas upside down. In reality, they grow in reverse to what we see in the image, and the fallen fruit in the foreground seem to be floating on the soft grass, not actually touching the ground. I personally wish he would have included the tree on the left and not cut it in the middle like that, but I guess Rousseau decided the whole tree wasn't going to fit in this composition. The two wild beasts struggle in a world of their own in a carefully constructed dreamscape. Fight Between a Tiger and a Buffalo belongs to the Cleveland Museum of Art. The Sleeping Gypsy. The Sleeping Gypsy was regarded as one of the most representative paintings or images in modern art, at least the modern art that was blooming at the end of the 19th century. Henri Rousseau painted this image in 1897 with remarkable meticulosity and naivete all in one. He painted a sleeping woman in oriental dress lying on the sand of the desert with a water jug and a mandolin next to her, unaware of the lion that is sniffing her shoulder. The lion's mane is painted with such minute detail, strand by strand of hair, similar to the leafage in the jungle paintings. In the moonlight, just like in carnival evening, there is both danger and stillness. The moon even seems to have a fading human face and is one of the painting's attraction spots, along with the widely opened eye of the lion, the very colorful stripy garment, and the red water jug. The painting was a donation by Simon Guggenheim to the Museum of Modern Art in New York after it had many previous owners. It remains there to this day, and it can be seen on display. The Dream. The Dream is the most iconic painting in Henri Rousseau's short career and is one of the most emblematic images of the 20th century modernity. The Dream is almost like a synthesis of his entire work, which was always symbolic, surrealist, naive, avant-garde, deeply modern. In the jungle, we see a sofa with a nude woman waking up from her sleep to find herself inside a dream. It is believed this is the portrait of Jadwiga, a former girlfriend from Rousseau's youth. Jadwiga listens to the song of the snake charmer in the shadow and invites us to discover animals, birds, and fruit concealed among the luscious greenery. The full moon above the entire scene is a delicate source of light that reveals the hidden mysteries of the dark jungle. Two lions, a pink snake lured by the charmer's melody, an elephant seen from its profile, just like the hidden figure in the evening carnival, colorful birds and apes hanging from trees in the background. The dream was completed and showed at the Salon of Independent Artists in spring, and in the fall of that year, in September, Rousseau passed away. This was his last and greatest masterpiece that is on display at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. In December 1908, Pablo Picasso decided to organize a banquet in honor of Henri Rousseau's unique presence in the Parisian art world, but it was a strange mixture of honest appreciation and sarcastic mockery that was by then a typical approach when it came to Le Douanier's paintings. "You and I," said Henri Rousseau to Pablo Picasso, "are the two most important artists of the age, you in the Egyptian style and I in the modern one," much to everyone at the party's delight and amusement. Perhaps Rousseau's naivete wasn't only present in his art, but also in the way he viewed the world, himself, and the people around him. Alongside Picasso and his then companion and muse Fernand Olivier, guests at the banquet included Guillaume Apollinaire, Jean Metzinger, Juan Gris, Max Jacob, Picasso dealer Kahnweiler, Leo and Gertrude Stein. Sometime in the early 1900s, Henri Rousseau was teaching violin and drawing, even working as a volunteer despite being extremely poor. However, he managed to have some portraits commissioned for very little money, even though the work he put into them was considerable. During this time, he was bestowed with a Palme Académique order for distinguished merits in the academic field. This was an error made by the presence of another man named Rousseau, the intended recipient. Despite realizing the confusion, Rousseau wore the small badge for the rest of his life. One of Rousseau's most important paintings, The Sleeping Gypsy, was intended to be donated by the artist to his hometown of Laval. Not only was he sincere, but also seemingly not fully aware of the way conventional society perceived his work. He thought that if avant-garde modern artists appreciated his work, then he is considered by the entire society to be a great artist himself. That wasn't the case because of his lack of formal training, his lack of technical skill. His painting was rejected. The only thing he achieved with the painting was to provoke the amusement of the mayor of Laval. I bet they regret that now. If we look at the rather too short career of Henri Rousseau, we understand why he made this portrait of himself among Paris's most iconic buildings and the River Seine. Just like them, he was a valuable element of the city whose recognition and appreciation came much later. If he only knew that people today line up in museum galleries to see his work, not to ridicule it, but to marvel at it. Do you have a favorite Henri Rousseau painting? Please share your opinion in the comments section so we can exchange impressions. Thank you for watching, and if you found today's episode interesting, please give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already to join me next time when we unravel another layer in art.